This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
And we got Aaron Torres on with us from the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast, Fox Sports Radio, and worth checking out the website, Aaron Torres Online as well. AT, we got week number 3 about to be underway in college football tonight. How are you?
I'm doing really well, guys. Is it nice to not have a marquee game this weekend? I mean, you know, I remember talking to you guys literally about this 3 weeks ago about we're going to learn a lot about the Hogs in the first 2 weeks, and you know, I think we learned we got another pretty good football team this year.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, a team that can run it right down your throat even when you're expecting it, and there's not much that either Cincinnati or South Carolina has been able to do to stop them as far as that's concerned. The defense looks really salty, too, especially the defensive line, Aaron, and that was like the question mark a lot of folks had coming into the season. Defensive line looks solid, and Drew Sanders, linebacker transfer out of Alabama, absolutely is a huge difference maker and looks like one of the better linebackers Arkansas has had in a while. They've had some good ones the last couple of years, too.
Yeah, you know, I just think in general, you know, I try to monitor the portal. I mean, I follow it really closely in basketball. Football, obviously, there's just such a high volume of players. But it felt like between Jaden Hazelwood, who I hope that they were able to dig up that poor defensive back from South Carolina that got thrown into the turf the other day. But between Hazelwood, Drew Sanders, you know, the kid from LSU, it seems as though, you know, Arkansas is one of those programs, right, where, and this is no disrespect intended, but, you know, I know last year you finished with, a top 15 class in the country, but there are elite guys that are always going to want to take a shot, take a shot at Alabama or Ohio State or Georgia. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. I mean, Drew Sanders was a guy that got on the field and played significant snaps for Alabama, but for whatever reason he decides to enter the portal, and it just feels like Arkansas, with the way they play, something the three of us have talked about for weeks on end now, that they have a defined brand, a defined style. They are who they are. I think it's going to be really intriguing for those upper-level transfer guys that are entering the portal that, for whatever reason, chose against Arkansas the first time. Again, Hazelwood's another one that comes to mind. But, yeah, Drew Sanders was unbelievable last Saturday, Phil.
All right, now, what do you mean this is not a marquee matchup? This Bobby Petrino returning to Arkansas.
That's true.
Be FBS, FCS, sure, it's never going to be marquee, but this is one that we've had circled on our calendar, and it's like part so much of the story, in fact, are like, what are your reactions going to be in the stands when Petrino comes in? I'm not sure if you know this, but there's talk of the student section may all be wearing neck braces when he walks in.
Oh, so no.
Dude, we're expecting a spectacle at Razorback Stadium.
I was going to ask you, what is the you guys would know better than me, what is the reaction? I mean, you know, it ended so poorly, but, you know, it ended poorly for Bobby Petrino personally. But, you know, I don't know. He left the NFL in the middle of the season to come to Arkansas, got them to heights that are just now starting to get back a decade later. You know, I don't know how I feel, but, you know, I don't think he wanted to leave Arkansas. He just did something, you know, that he shouldn't have done in his personal life. What is the reaction around town? I'm kind of curious.
Well, I mean, it's kind of ambivalent in some ways. I mean, there are people that are time can heal all wounds, and somebody, you know, people are allowed second chances, third chances, that kind of thing. And, you know, a couple years ago, Petrino came back to Arkansas for the first time at the Little Rock Touchdown Club and gave what felt like a real heartfelt apology.
Let me jump in.
Shoot.
What is going on at the Little Rock Touchdown Club? Why is every big story in football, you know, emanating from the Little Rock Touchdown Club? Like, John Gruden literally hasn't left his house in a year, and he's showing up at the Little Rock Touchdown Club. Something else happened. I can't remember what. What is going on over there? You guys, I swear, man, every time I look up, there's some big story coming out of the Little Rock Touchdown Club.
It was Coach O 2 weeks ago.
Coach O? Yes.
Yeah. When he
what door? What door do you want me out?
What door do you want me to walk through? That's right. And then it was Paul Feinbaum.
What is going on over
the other
there?
Day. Well, it's a touchdown club that's got a lot of support. It's got a creative guy running it, in David Basil, who's got a lot of contacts, a lot of respect, I think, throughout the football world. So, yeah, I mean, I think you can kind of expect this for the rest of the season. But Like when they brought Petrino back in a couple years ago, that was an eye-opening moment because that was the first time that he'd returned to the state since I guess he'd sold his house. I don't even know if he made it back to actually, be part of selling the house back then. He was probably still coaching. But the perception is, I think a lot of people want to be forgiving. Also for the idea that Petrino was responsible in a lot of ways for two of the most successful seasons in recent Razorback history. But there's a lot of people also that can't, it's not forgive, but forget the way it went down and then the crater that Arkansas fell into football-wise for such a long time, which finally now, the last 2 years, it's obvious they're out of it and looks like they got a real base.
Well, I was going to say, I think, it's easier, I think, to let bygones be bygones now that the team is good. Like, I do wonder, if this was 3 years ago and the team is 1-4 coming into the game or whatever, under the previous coaching regime, there might be a real possibility that you lose this game. Maybe it feels a little bit different. Yeah, that would be my perspective as well. As a couple things is, one, he did, he left the program in good shape. Like, I mean, he personally left under a dark cloud, obviously, but he left the program in good shape, and it's not his fault that the guys that followed him couldn't kind of maintain that success. And then my other quick thought would be, obviously, Coach Pittman, doing what he's doing, I think probably makes the pill a little bit easier to swallow, where if it was still a bad situation, as I said, a losing record, a coach nobody believes in, I guess that'd be a little bit of a different deal.
I want to get to some of the picks that you've decided on here because, you get some like rivalry games here that really don't seem like they'd be a great game necessarily, maybe in years before. I mean, there's a rivalry with South Carolina and Georgia. Arkansas had a real effect on South Carolina, though, because Jordan Strawn and Muhammad Kaba, two of their top defensive players, left the game with injuries. They're done for the year. And Georgia looks so darn good right now. I know last week you picked Alabama to cover a first-half spread on the road against Texas. That didn't work out, but you're doing the same with Georgia.
It did not.
And I feel even on the road, with the struggles and the injuries that Carolina has defensively, Georgia should be able to cover that first-half spread.
Yeah, no, I totally think so. My thought is, I think, first of all, think back to last year, people might forget this, but Shane Beamer after this game had an all-time quote. I don't know if you guys remember this or not, but he was kind of asked, like, hey, why did you guys struggle to run the ball today against Georgia? And he's like, they have 72 five-star recruits. Like, I went back and looked at the video the other day. It was incredible. He's like, they have a guy that's 360 pounds that runs better than anybody in this building, right? Like, it was just an all-time rant. But I bring it up because, I think, Phil, you used the word rivalry, and it is a rivalry, and it was probably a decade ago when Steve Spurrier was there, maybe the best rivalry in the SEC East. 3 of the last 4 years, Georgia's won by 24 or more points. And so, including last year in South Carolina. And so I just look at this and listen, Shane Beamer, maybe he'll figure it out, maybe he won't. But this just feels like the game that's tailor-made for Georgia to just destroy South Carolina. I mean, the way that Arkansas ran the ball, that's what Georgia wants to do, right? I mean, Georgia wants to just run the ball down your throat, jump on you early, call off the dogs, pun intended, late. And I think this is one where I don't think they're going to have any problem doing it. South Carolina's got the worst run defense in the SEC right now, and I know part of it is because of Arkansas, but I don't think statistically they get any better, against another elite run defense. Oh, by the way, without, as you mentioned, Phil, a couple key defensive players.
AT, I think the team that none of us would want to trade with this week would probably be Louisiana Monroe, especially having to go up against Bama.
Texas A&M. I thought you were going to say Texas A&M,
in
but
Austin. Well, we'll get to that in a second. Are the wheels falling off in Tuscaloosa? I mean, it felt weird this week of watching that game on Saturday. Then the rant that we know Saban's going to get into when he starts to throw out the ites and everything else. Are the Tide okay?
Well, I think being ranked number 2 in the country, going on the road, beating a good team, qualifies as being okay. I do think, is the mystique gone? I don't know. That feels a little bit too much. But what it does feel like, guys, this looks like a lot like the team last year that was very vulnerable. A team last year that Arkansas lost to by 7 points on the road. A team that LSU lost to by 6 points on the road. A team that Auburn easily could have beaten. I mean, I think, it was funny when Nick Saban said that quote a few weeks ago about last year being a rebuilding year. Like, I don't think it was like a crazy thing for him to say. But I think we all thought, well, you take the lumps last year to build back to the elite program in college football this year. And I just don't know, Drew. It's a great question by you. I don't think it's like, 5-alarm fire panic time. But what I would say, where I would be concerned, is I don't think they're as dominant and as separated from the field as we thought. And now all of a sudden you look at their schedule. They barely survive at Texas. We all know if Quinn Ewers plays, they probably don't win. They still got to go to Arkansas. They still got to go to Tennessee. And so those are two completely different teams, but two really tough teams. They got to play at Ole Miss, who hasn't figured out their quarterback situation yet. So I just think what it says to me, Drew, is I thought this was by far the best team in college football coming into this year, and it looks like they're really good, but it looks like they're flawed. And like I said, it looks like the gap between them and, say, an Arkansas or an Ole Miss or even a Mississippi State, which I'm very intrigued by this weekend, by the way, maybe that gap isn't as big as we thought.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's go on to the A&M that you brought up. Are they going to be able to bounce back against Miami this week?
I think they will. I'm not even a huge Max Johnson guy. Obviously, everybody's seen the news by now that Max Johnson's going to be starting on Saturday. I'm not a huge Max Johnson guy, but what he is stable, reliable. He's nothing flashy, but he doesn't beat himself. And, last year, and I think we're seeing it at LSU this year, I don't think people realize, like LSU, part of the reason they lost, they just didn't have the dudes that they did even 2-3 years before. Didn't have the guys certainly on the offensive line. Didn't have the skill position guys, and there was a lot of injuries and stuff. But, like, when Max Johnson is given a full deck, like, he's fine. I don't think he's elite, but he's fine. And he will have a full deck on Saturday against Miami. And so when I look at that whole thing, a couple things stand out. One, Miami, they're 2-0. I wouldn't say they've been unbelievable in their 2 wins. But then beyond that, the other thing that stands out with Miami, have any of those guys ever played in an environment like this? I mean, Saturday night, Kyle Field, and this does give me a little bit of vibes of last year against Alabama. If you remember, Texas A&M was, of course, coming off back-to-back losses, one of them being against Arkansas, the other one Mississippi State at home, and everybody kind of was throwing the roses on Jimbo's grave. Ends up beating Alabama. Now, I think they get the win this weekend. I don't know what it means for next Saturday against Arkansas. I don't know what it means for, the next 4 or 5 weeks against really tough competition with Alabama, Mississippi State, etc. I do think they get the win this weekend back against the wall. I think Max Johnson does enough to help them out there.
Is Jimbo Fisher the most overrated, quote-unquote, quarterback whisperer? He still has that reputation for some reason because of Jameis. I mean, Kellen Mond got a little bit better as he went through his career, but he probably could have been better than he was. And here it is. It's 2 years in a row. I mean, he picked Haynes King last year, and obviously the broken leg ruined that, and the rest of the season for A&M spoke for itself. You bring in a couple more quarterbacks this year, choose the wrong guy again. I mean, when does Jimbo Fisher lose the title or the respect of being like Mr. Quarterback guy?
It was funny. I watched the Monday night game between Denver and Seattle, and obviously they line up for the crazy kick late. They don't get it. They lose Denver. And I said to myself, if we label everyone an offensive genius, then by definition, like we devalue what the word genius. Like not every. The reason we have a term like genius is because it is an exemplary, one of a kind thing. And in the NFL, we have about. We have 32 teams coached by about, 27 offensive geniuses. I think Jimbo Fisher's starting to fit in that category in the college game is that, his offense looks out of date. As you said, Phil, by the way, even when they were winning a few years ago with Kellen Mond, it was really the defense that was doing it. And, it's just, you look across college football right now. I mean, what Lane Kiffin's doing, what Steve Sarkisian's doing, I don't claim by any stretch to be a X's and O's genius, but it just looks like it's out of a different era, right? It just looks like it's out of a different era. And it's kind of like the Jim Harbaugh thing at Michigan is like, you're supposed to be this offensive savant. How can you not figure out the quarterback position? And so I think that's part of why I'm intrigued by this weekend, Phil, is we know there's talent pretty much everywhere else, right? Like, I mean, we all see the recruiting rankings. We all read the stories in the offseason. I just think they need like average to slightly above average quarterback play, and they'll be okay. But at the end of the day, it does fall on the head coach if the quarterback play isn't great. And then on top of that, this was his hand-picked guy. And if this guy won the job out of camp, it means that he was the best guy, which obviously speaks to how poorly things were during camp, if that makes sense.
BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports, contests, and events with first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews and news for every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports information, from live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to join today and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50 to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's BELIEVE, BLEAV 50. That's BELIEVE, BLEAV 50. Bet online, where the game starts.